Um, I think before we kick it off, we need to go ahead and recognize our new sponsors for this year. New year, so some new sponsors. We have Altera, Bad Elf, Concert Tech, New Edge, Tinriz, and also Atmos Energy. Some of these are also continuing from last year, so big shout out and a thank you to them. Today's talk is going to cover URISA highlights from the 2021-2022 year, URISA Board of Directors activities, the Policy Advisory Committee, chapter support, and looking forward. Who we have speaking today is Ashley Hitt. Thank you, Ashley, for joining us. Ashley is a GISP and the Vice President of Geoanalytics at Connected Nation, a national leader in broadband expansion programs. She oversees operations, project execution, and strategic planning for the geoanalytics team. As mentioned, she is a GISP and she holds a Bachelor of Science in Geography and a Master of Science in Geoscience from Western Kentucky University. She was elected as a URISA Young GIS Professional of the Year in 2011, received the 2017 URISA Leadership Award and the 2020 URISA Service Award, and became URISA President at the end of GIS Pro 2022. Without further ado, Ashley, you have the floor.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt. So as I get started, as Matt said, my name is Ashley Hitt. I am based in Louisville, Kentucky, and the current URISA president. I'm excited to be here as part of the speaker series for URISA Texas, and certainly one of the things that certainly URISA and the chapters have both been working on, because we are one organization. We have the parent organization as well as local chapters definitely across the country working on incorporation of additional chapters internationally, as well as we've moved into this new kind of membership model situation. And so I'm excited to share kind of what's going on, how we can better work together, and certainly continuing to work together the most efficiently for all of the members in URISA across the board. So as Matt mentioned, the outline for today, I really want to go through kind of like what are some of the things that have been occurring at URISA, kind of high level, some of the things that the board of directors have been taking on, looking at kind of strategic vision activities for what is the organization doing now? How do we move forward more efficiently and effectively in the future? How do we enhance the offerings and things that URISA and the chapters and everybody does together? And then specifically, I want to highlight the Policy Advisory Committee, because that has become just something that URISA offers that is not only a little bit unique, but also very, very helpful to us as geospatial professionals, as well as for the industry as a whole. Then I definitely want to highlight the chapter support, because things have been changing with like the new membership model, as well as a membership management system and all the technology and things that that's going to give to all of us to be able to collaborate a lot more, get things done more efficiently, have more of that syncing of effort. And then certainly looking forward of, what are some of the things in development? How can we better work with each other, learn from each other, have that collaboration, membership involvement, engagement kind of across the board. So going into some of the URISA highlights, and I'll say that the URISA quote year goes from GIS Pro Conference to GIS Pro Conference. So when it says here 2021 to 22, that is really a reflection of when GIS Pro, the conference occurred in 2021, and then when it occurred in 2022, just a few months ago in Boise, Idaho. So as we looked from what we had been doing, certainly, we had pivoted during, when the pandemic first started, and then kind of repivoted when in-person events were coming back online. And what did that mean for the conference, for virtual offerings, the GIS Leadership Academy, et cetera. Also looking at some advocacy to U.S. Congress, the immediate past president, Brent Jones, he spoke on behalf of URISA in a congressional outreach meeting for NGS, the National Geodetic Survey. And so that was part of what he was able to do during his presidential year on behalf of URISA, was, get us that exposure to Congress, even talking about, geospatial items and things that really matter to us as an industry. One thing that also happened was the Survey and GIS Summit. As different, chapters and different events have occurred, how do we work better and more efficiently together with the surveying community and GIS? There are several URISA members that are both GISPs and professional engineers, and how do we bring those together, or I'm sorry, professional survey, I should say. So how do we bring those together? Because there has been different legislation, and I'll go more into detail when we talk about the Policy Advisory Committee. So there has been different legislation on, what defines geospatial, what requires a surveyor, and how do we both work together? Because we have several similarities and things that overlap. So we held the Survey and GIS Summit in the past year, and that was very successful. It was very collaborative and coordinated effort with NSPS and other surveying organizations, and some of those members that I highlighted that are both in surveying and GIS, and how do we better operate together, collaborate, and discuss things before they become potentially a legislative issue. Also, one new thing that happened last year was the first offering of the LEAP conference, or Location, Enterprise Addressing, and Public Safety. And that was offered last year in February for the first time. It's a virtual event. It's being offered again in just a couple weeks here, also as a virtual event, really bringing together that aspect of geospatial in terms of that precision location, what we can do from it, how people are working closely together for it, certainly looking at 911 addressing, new things like broadband, who are really grasping on to that location-based data to make a difference for served, underserved, and unserved communities, and how we find the solutions best there. So that is a virtual event that is coming up. It's a few days in early February, so definitely be sure to check that one out. There was also a new redistricting guide for the GIS community as the Census 2020 data came out, and just looking at additional information for redistricting. So that was another guide, especially if you're in local government, that could be taken care of. We also launched a task force on pro-equity and anti-racism, also known as the PAIR. So originally that was a task force that was established to look at ways that URISA can, be more inclusive, to identify ways that maybe there's different language or opportunities that are not as well known, or that we can really look through that PAIR lens as far as activities, strategic action, how people are nominated for certain positions, how we engage different communities and really work together. So this originally started as a task force, and as of GIS Pro 2022, it is now actually transitioned to a full URISA committee. So that original task force was looking at, what is, the URISA bylaws and the Constitution, and we're still working on different aspects of that, but realizing that, kind of trying it out for that first year, that PAIR really should be a full-on committee. Like, they should exist for kind of all time, essentially, in terms of having that committee. So really looking internally at URISA functions, documentation, involvement, engagement, etc. So very happy to report that that committee or task force has been fully transitioned to a committee and is very involved on all activities and aspects of URISA moving forward. Currently working to deploy the new membership model, so that work has continued. Also working on implementing the new membership management program called Your Membership. So additional details will be available with that. We did have some delays with Your Membership just getting, just kind of executed, like getting it underway, getting things in order so that, membership, dues and renewals, registration for events, the new website. So it's happening incrementally, and there's a lot more work to done because there's a lot more that we can get out of it as members, as chapters, and there's so much that it's going to offer us. So trying to establish kind of like that baseline that we need to have with this member management system, and then kind of going from there. What are the other things that this offers to us that we can take advantage of? And then one of the other big things that's a highlight is the cross-organizational webinar and professional education. So there is a professional education committee that works on various aspects of webinars, professional education, workshops, bringing all of these different things under kind of an umbrella of making sure that, consistent in messaging, what are hot topics that, there needs to be a new workshop developed on so that the membership can take advantage of that. And so I'm not going to read through each one of these individually, but looking at the webinars and virtual workshops that took place over the course of that URISA year, we highlighted the ESIG award winners, that's exemplary systems in government. So the award winners there, giving them an opportunity to talk about, is it an application that they developed? Is it a different process that was put in place for the enhancement of government activities and functionality through geospatial? Also highlighting different hot topics, things like broadband, looking at the GISP certification, workshops like the introduction to equity and social justice. So there's, obviously, as we know, there are so many ways that geospatial, different things that geospatial touches, and all the different industries that we work in. Us as URISA members, we represent local, state, federal government. We represent private sector, nonprofit, academia. We have just so many people in different places that work on different types of geospatial. So being able to highlight those and find, which parts of these professional education activities speak to us and that can help kind of close the gaps or find solutions that we need for our own organization. Here we've got just kind of a quick summary of some of the URISA events kind of by the numbers. So that surveying and GIS summit that I mentioned, that was a virtual offering that was done in 2021. So there's about 224 people that attended that. We had there was a GIS Leadership Academy, and those are traditionally kept small. So usually there's a max of about 50 people, and then certainly, during the pandemic, it completely shifted to virtual and then began offering in-person offerings again as well. So numbers were still a little bit lower than anticipated, but the max is always about 50 because the GIS Leadership Academy really focuses on the facilitation of discussion and exercises and bringing people together, no matter where in your geospatial career path you are, to learn about those leadership functionality capabilities with that geospatial focus. And so whether you are interested in becoming, a GIS manager, supervisor, leader, senior executive, et cetera, or you're already there or you have been there, the Leadership Academy offers a way to learn more facilitated discussion about how to manage different types of organizations. Like I mentioned, we've got local government, we've got for-profit, nonprofit, et cetera. Each one of those is managed and operated differently. So being able to learn more about geospatial and different types of those functions has really been so helpful for the GIS Leadership Academy. There was another one held in Minneapolis last December, and that only had 18 people. It was still a really good group of people to work with and have those facilitated discussions. But certainly, as people were still, a little bit wary of, the travel and having in-person events, but that has continued to increase over the past year. The LEAP conference, which was held for the first time last February virtually, that actually reached 200 attendees for that offering, 2 or 3 days worth of literally very, very specific on location and addressing and all the different ways we are applying it throughout the various industries that we do represent. There was also the GIS the Valtech conference, so very focused on the tax assessors. That one is done in collaboration with an organization called IAAO, which is very specific on the assessing side, and then certainly URISA brings that geospatial side. That was at just less than 300. There was another virtual GIS Leadership Academy that was held last summer, and then one in Philadelphia as well. GIS Pro, the conference that was held in Boise, that was in person, and that had over 425 attendees. That was also done in partnership with the Northwest GIS User Group and the Northern Rockies chapter of URISA. And then just to wrap it up there, the GIS Leadership Academy that was in Santa Rosa, California, that did get to the max offering of 50 people. So seeing that need and capacity is getting reached again at the 50 attendees has been very encouraging. So the GIS Leadership Academy will continue to have a couple offerings a year. For 2023, it's going to be held in Charlotte in June and Denver at the end of November, early December. And then there's also planning underway to get another virtual GIS Leadership Academy scheduled. So still, recognizing that there are still and always going to be, URISA members who are not able to travel or who will be better suited for a virtual offering. And so the GIS Leadership Academy is going to continue to have both in-person and virtual events moving forward. I want to shift to the Board of Directors activities now. So just a few of the highlights of what happened over the course of that previous year. So approving various actions, looking at that new membership management system. So there were some decisions strategically that needed to be made, certainly financially, as all of that was working to get implemented, get it set up the right way so that all of us, both, Wendy Nelson and the headquarters staff, as well as, chapter leaders, the board of directors, all the committees, everybody can have, equitable access to everything that this new system is going to offer. We also approved a revision to the URISA policy manual, one of kind of the core documents that defines URISA. We've got the original constitution that was developed when URISA was first established, and there's been a few updates to that, not very many, and then goes more specifically into the bylaws of how things actually are accomplished, and then the policy manual, which gets even more specific. So working kind of an overarching documentation, more specific with each type. And so the policy manual really gets into the details of different parts of committees, nominating for certain opportunities, how membership and things run. So each of these documents have different levels of information. And so the board approved a revision to the policy manual that added a required attribute for a board member to be, quote, to have a commitment to ethics, diversity, equity, inclusion, and civility. And so when people are nominated, self-nominate, et cetera, through the Leadership Development Committee that works to establish the slate for the Board of Directors election to occur, this is something that each candidate must agree to before being approved to run for the Board of Directors. And so that was something that was recently added. There were also various actions in support of chapters executing and implementing their respective charter agreements. And so, any of those chapter activities that are coming through the Board of Directors, all of those are reviewed. And then certainly we have the CDRC rep who is on the Board of Directors and providing additional feedback and information on chapters, what's going to be useful, what's best strategically, and really working together on how we can be the best for what we're all trying to accomplish, which is to provide our members with an experience and offerings that develop all of us professionally. A few other updates. We also approved the GIS Core Volunteer Recognition Awards Program. GIS Core is, a URISA initiative. It kind of operates a little bit independently, but still has, certainly that correlation and connection with URISA as a whole. So there is a new volunteer recognition awards program that is now in place. We also approved the recommendations of the PEC, the Professional Education Committee, on analyzing just a different way of how to look at professional education at URISA. And so they've kind of structured a multi-year plan to look at how do we best expand that programming, especially on the virtual side, because certainly as we've seen since the pandemic first started, that there were several people that attended, for instance, the GIS Pro Conference that was virtual, that may not have ever been able to attend in person, whether it's different personal or professional restrictions, funding, whatever the case is. So now the PEC is looking at ways of, how do we continue to expand upon that, and what different infrastructure, organization do we need to have in place, and how does that also relate to the new Your Membership system, and how do we bring all that together? So they've been working on a multi-year plan of things to look into, and then, hey, is this working? Do we need to pivot? Do we still need to continue? And really kind of taking that into account so we can offer the best of what professional education is needed by us, the members, and how can we best expand that, look at new hot topics for additional workshops, et cetera. One of the other items that we did was send a letter to the House and Senate Appropriations Committee in support of funding the Census Bureau at increased levels. That has typically been a frequent activity of the Board of Directors, definitely supporting Census Bureau activities. As several of us know, we've been using the census data, various parts of it. It's a huge part of, some of the analyses and things that we do. So making sure that the Census Bureau is, funded at the levels that make the most sense to get this information as accurate as possible, as detailed as possible, and being able to move forward with that information. Now I want to shift into the Policy Advisory Committee. So the URISA board originally established the Policy Advisory Committee, or the PAC, several years ago in 2008, and they have been charged with recommending formal policy positions that either pertain directly to URISA's mission, that do not involve partisan political lobbying or direct support for a political party or candidate, and are always been reviewed and the position recommended in accordance with the established procedures of the committee. And so the PAC has been around, for over 15 years now, and has really kind of taken off. There's so many different URISA members across the country, as well as some international presence, where we're really looking at what are different legislative activities that are going on that could impact geospatial, whether it's us as individual members, as chapters, as organizations, the companies that we work for, our governments, etc. So there's a lot that they kind of take into account. And so this in particular, because we have URISA internal policies like that policy manual document we talked about a little bit ago, but the PAC really has an outward facing view on all of these different policy issues, and really looking to see, is there something that's going to impact us as an industry, our organizations, our companies, negatively, positively? Do we support these things? Are we concerned? And really kind of keeping track of those. So really want to stress that PAC is a resource for chapters and members for advice and assistance. So as any of us become aware of something, if the chapter becomes aware of something, letting the PAC know about it so that it can be investigated, it can be debated, it can look at different policy, we can see where there are perhaps relationships, if it's a bill or some type of legislation that has been written, introduced, whether on the state level or the federal level, what impacts could this possibly have? And if it is negative, how do we not lobby, because that's definitely not what we do as a nonprofit organization, but how can we raise awareness that this would cause harm to geospatial people and professionals and organizations? So really taking all of that into account. And additionally, they may develop guides or white papers, and certainly reviewing things like the redistricting white paper that came out in the last year as well. So continuing on kind of what their main purpose is, they are looking to investigate policy mainly from three sources, whether that is, a board member becomes aware of something, a member or chapter has a request on, hey, we saw X piece of legislation, we have concerns about how this is going to impact us. What do you all think? Could URISA write a letter of support or, raising awareness of some of these challenges, or certainly the PAC itself. So Glenn O'Grady is the current PAC chair, and he has done an amazing job the past few years, really tracking different pieces of legislation as they get introduced, what has a geospatial impact on it, whether, it's something as significant as the Geospatial Data Act that occurred, almost 5 years ago now, or is it something that's kind of, I won't say hidden, but is kind of in the depths of a piece of legislation that, this one sentence or this one clause might really impact geospatial professionals or our ability to do our job, or something at a government level, at a private sector company. What are the impacts? And being able to review that together, to debate, to see if we have any connections with any legislative offices that we can raise this concern to, because a lot of times what the PAC has found is that some of the intent is not there. The intent is going for the betterment of sharing data and information to make something enhanced, and it's not meant to be a detriment to the geospatial community, but the way it's written might be. So we've been able to raise that awareness and get things changed, revised, stopped that may have that negative impact. So after the PAC is reviewing those different types of legislation, activities, et cetera, they will make a recommendation to the URISA board of how to best respond, support, interact, et cetera. And then the board will take that up for consideration and review, vote, whatever steps might be necessary, depending on which part is of concern there. And so the board's purpose is to establish that URISA policy. So if that is something that is going to impact the URISA mission or the members, what can we do to make the best case scenario for everything? And then the board can also act without PAC involvement. So if this is something that is very urgent in nature, there's going to be a vote quite soon and attention is needed pretty quickly, the board has the authority to act without PAC involvement. We certainly hope to have that enough time to really debate and get in really in depth with what does this mean, and sometimes it really does come down to semantics of a legislative a bill or what language is in there. So being able to ideally work together and have the time to really digest and review and see where things are coming from to be able to make the best decision possible. So in terms of some of the key issues that were looked at last year, just highlighting a few of them that are here. This first one is with Legato, and that is an organization or a company rather, that has been looking to expand broadband internet access. However, they would be using a spectrum that is very, very close to or adjacent to GPS. And so that has been a huge concern. There have been kind of disagreements across the board of, oh, this will interfere with GPS. Others saying, oh, no, we did this study. No, it will not. So watching that very closely. The FCC has been involved. Department of Defense has been involved. There's been a lot of federal agencies that are actually kind of arguing against each other, even as far as what are the impacts to this. And so some of those discussions have kind of stalled. There's not been as much attention to this, but it's still something that the PAC is looking at. We've also been keeping track of the Geospatial Data Act implementation because when the act was signed into law in 2018, actually it literally happened during GIS Pro that year. And so, several of us were immediately looking at all the, final documentation and what physically got approved because there had been different changes that had occurred then, but there was also different parts of implementation of different reports that need to happen and how to get some of that interactivity and collaboration among the various agencies. So the PAC continues to monitor that because it is going to be important for our members and some of us, especially if we are in some of those government or federal organizations or agencies. How is that going to impact us in the various reporting and things that we need to do? And then, of course, just being able to share and work with geospatial data across the board. Another one that was very specifically looked at was Pennsylvania House Bill 609. And for that one, there was language that could have been problematic for geospatial professionals. So the PAC drafted an opposition letter and worked with local Pennsylvania GIS folks, worked with the Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure Committee. And after that, the bill ended up being revised and it removed the potential threat to GIS professional practice. So that one was a very real situation where the intent was not to harm the geospatial community, but we found it early enough. We're able to work with local GIS folks in the state and be able to make a difference there so that geospatial professionals in the state were not impacted negatively as would have happened if the regular or the initial language had actually gone through. PAC continues to monitor mapping broadband availability. This is something known as the broadband data collection through the FCC. Heavy on the geospatial component, actually relates very well into that new LEAP conference on location, enterprise addressing, and public safety. And so bringing address level data, what are those geographic changes? And then how do we as geospatial professionals both monitor and use the data, contribute to the data, challenge it where necessary. So there's a lot of different geospatial activities going on for broadband as well. The PAC continues to follow census issues, certainly looking at 2030 census planning. I mean, as soon as data comes out for one decennial census, they are already planning for the next one. So what are ways that the PAC can be supporting and following that? There have also been a lot of different federal legislation about floodplain mapping and getting things in order there. So PAC is watching that. And then also with professional boundaries. So we talked about surveying and GIS earlier. That is definitely one topic that the PAC continues to look at, because there has been different legislation where surveying might be supporting part of it, but it could be detrimental to GIS or geospatial practice. So how do we make sure that we work together? Because it's in all the conversations that I've either been involved with or have been able to attend, it's not GIS versus surveying, but how do we work together for a common goal? Because there are differences in our objectives and how we get everything accomplished together. So PAC continues to monitor those professional boundaries as well. And so kind of wrapping up here, some of the additional key goals for the PAC continues to work with other geospatial professions on defining those professional boundaries, like with surveying. They want to revisit the NCEES model laws and rules. They want to expand the PAC discussions to their URISA community with the new system, and that new system being your membership, or YM. And so as that is getting really launched and allowing us to further the discussion and be able to say, hey, there's going to be a PAC call on X date, and here's this new piece of legislation that's come up. If it impacts you, or you know about it, or there's something that the PAC doesn't know about, let's bring it up. So the PAC is looking at ways to better get that collaboration and engagement from all of us to make sure that all the things that are going on, like, we don't get hopefully surprised by something. And so that we hopefully are tracking as much as possible and working together on what solutions make the most sense for the members, the chapters, the organization, the profession, etc. The PAC is going to continue monitoring the Geospatial Data Act implementation. Actually, just even in the last week or so, there's been a revision suggested for the GDA. And so the PAC is taking a look at what those impacts would be to be able to make a recommendation on how URISA should respond to it or not, depending on what the deliberation is. They will also continue to monitor federal and state legislation and rules. So as those different things come up, what do we need to be aware of? And then improving the web presence. And certainly the new Your Membership System website, forums, all of that is going to allow us to better collaborate, get involved, be able to submit information to the PAC where we say, hey, I think this needs to be reviewed. What do URISA members think? How do we need to act? And so in closing with the PAC, if you have any thoughts or things that are going on, if there's something specific in Texas, whether it's a piece of legislation or something at the local level, something that somebody has seen federally that could impact your business, your company regarding geospatial, let the PAC know what you think. So your membership is currently being implemented and launched. So as soon as that new online community is available, that is going to be a way to contact PAC to say, hey, I know about X issue and would like PAC involvement. There's also currently a URISA advocacy page on the website. This link may be changing with the launch to the new website. So more details to come. But as always, you can always reach out. So always feel free to reach out to me as the current URISA president, Wendy Nelson, who's the executive director of URISA, and then Glenn O'Grady as well, who's the current PAC chair. So any one of us will make sure that the information is passed on and reviewed appropriately so we can work together on what the best solution is for everyone. So the next topic I wanted to focus on is chapter support. So obviously, I'm here talking with you all at URISA Texas. Actually spoke with the New England chapter a couple months ago. And so obviously this is a huge part of URISA, is the chapter support, the chapter experience. There are still locations that do not have chapters, or maybe chapters that are no longer in existence. And so, what's the best way to support chapters and members, bringing together the resources that exist at URISA as like a headquarters or a parent organization? And, how do we make this a better two-way street as far as chapter support and what chapters need, what our members need, and getting everybody taken care of across the board. So some of these items include the URISA certified workshop. There's also the directors and officers insurance for each chapter's board of directors. So that is something that is covered and worked on through URISA headquarters. Also, one of the big things is that there's volume discounting for purchasing power. So for instance, the SCED app, that is something that URISA has used for GIS Pro conferences and other events that URISA has hosted, and that is also available at the chapter level. So when there are specific chapter level events or in-person taking advantage of the SCED app that actually shows the program of events for a specific offering or conference. Again, huge one is that your membership. So increasing the web presence, making sure that each chapter has information on, if it's a brand new URISA member and they need information on their local chapter, or if somebody who's moved to a new location and they're looking for, how do I get involved in my local chapter? What's going on? Who do I contact? How do I get started? So increasing that web presence so that we can make all those connections, and especially doing that through syncing the membership management. So before kind of the One URISA initiative to get kind of that model, membership model integrated, different chapters use different ways of monitoring operations, membership, events, etc. And so this is allowing for that syncing of membership management. And then one of the big things that's coming kind of next is looking at the additional kind of technology stack capability. So getting this initial foundation established with YM and then moving from that. So there is a tech team or a tech committee that is working on, looking at, okay, we've got the baseline of what YM does. What are the other things that it does that we could implement or easily integrate, or that would be beneficial for chapters, for members, for committees, everybody. So building from that foundation and kind of expanding upon that and building upon that to make sure that we are taking advantage of your membership as much as possible for everyone's benefit. We're also having support for adding additional geographies to chapter boundaries as appropriate. So for instance, the Ohio chapter of URISA recently kind of transitioned into the Ohio Valley chapter. And so now they have Ohio, West Virginia, and part of Pennsylvania. And so providing that support to adding those additional geographies to those chapter boundaries, getting awareness, looking at who the members are in those communities, to get them engaged, get them more involved, and at the very least, let them be aware that these things and these changes have happened. And then also one of the big things, CDRC, I think I should spell that out. That is the Chapter Development and Relations Committee. And so they will continue to facilitate and do idea share between the chapters, definitely voice concerns and challenges. Again, this would be a two-way communication. This is not, the URISA board implementing things and saying this is how it must be, but this is a two-way communication. So what are specific challenges and issues and concerns that chapters have? And each chapter is different. There may be some best practices that can come out of some of those discussions. There may be things that are truly unique for a community or a geographic boundary, and how do we best support all the different things that local chapters are doing. And so I definitely want to highlight Sarah Taylor, awesomely involved with URISA Texas, and she is a board member. She's a non-boarding board member as part of the CDRC representation on the URISA board of directors. So as any part of the strategic vision of URISA is discussed, new directions, new opportunities, there is Sarah, and there are also other board members that are heavily involved at the chapter that are bringing those perspectives to make sure that all aspects are considered before different actions are taken there. And so looking forward, again, your membership implementation, this is going to be huge because it is going to change the website for the better. It's going to change our collaboration and engagement, especially for volunteer activities, getting our membership engaged, different chapter opportunities, different collaboration. And so the Your Membership is just going to be huge, especially for URISA staff as well, because the URISA staff is very, very lean. And so the more things that can be done more efficiently, self-service, looking for certain things, looking for documentation, how to do X, Y, Z. The more we can do that, the better. Continuing to look at those additional technology stack developments and enhancements. So what are the things that can be made available that maybe someone hasn't thought about yet? And let's try it. We don't know until we try. So let's work together and see what does happen. Also want to throw out that just the involvement of young professionals, students, getting what do students need to know about URISA while they're still a student, and getting them involved early, as well as seeing what their challenges are. What did we experience when we were students, potentially in a geospatial field or department, et cetera? What are those challenges? Oh, hey, I wish I had known about that when I was still in school or doing a graduate degree, whatever the case may be. The URISA Vanguard Cabinet is the advisory board of young GIS professionals, and they're looking at all of that. They're made up of young GIS professionals that are URISA members, being able to look at what's going on at the chapter level, what's going on for students, people that are new in the field and new to any career. So what are those different initiatives, programs, discounts, et cetera, that they can be putting into place for the benefit of everyone, no matter what stage their career at. And so the last thing I want to throw out is just getting involved in volunteering. So obviously with all the different chapters are set up differently as far as what kind of subcommittees exist or engagement opportunities, volunteer opportunities. And so this is just a list of just some of the URISA committees that exist. We'll, certainly we focus today quite a bit on the Policy Advisory Committee, but there's also conference planning, there's GIS Corps, there's membership and marketing, community resiliency. So regardless of where we're at our organization, our professional interest, our personal interest, there are committees that likely exist for that. And if there aren't, if you feel like there should be a task force or a committee for X, bring it up. Let's talk about it. Let's get it implemented and see where it goes. And that's one of the great things about URISA is, we are able to establish what's needed for the benefit of all of us as members and geospatial professionals. So again, let's try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, now we know we tried. And we're not always kind of sitting in the background going, well, I wonder if. And so let's do it. Let's work together and collaborate on all of this because everybody benefits. And so before questions, I will throw out, there's been some save the dates that have gone out for the next GIS Pro conference. So this fall, it will be in Columbus, Ohio. We're working, currently looking at different partnership opportunities and certainly discussing things with GIS professionals in Ohio and the Ohio Valley chapter about conference activities. And so the call for presentations is about to go out. So if you would like to present at GIS Pro this year, whether that's an Ignite session, putting a panel together, giving a presentation on solutions that you've implemented or things that you've learned, et cetera, look for that call for volunteers here pretty soon. And so Matt, I will turn it back over to you for any questions that there might be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley. That was great. So we do have it looks like 2 questions so far. I will encourage you, if you do have questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll read them off here for the audience. But we'll go ahead and start with Sarah Hampton. Sarah asks, who is on the PAC and what do they do in their day-to-day?
Oh, that's a great question. So the PAC is actually just it's a group of URISA volunteers. And so almost all of them have, kind of, I hate to say day job, but they have their regular job, their day job, and then they are also a volunteer for the PAC. And so the Policy Advisory Committee, or the PAC, they meet once a month. There are Glenn O'Grady is the current PAC chair. He is actually retired, but he puts together these just elaborate documents that track different activities. What has happened since our last call? Has there been any activity on this piece of legislation? Has this one kind of gone away? Oh, we just found out about this thing in Pennsylvania. We need to discuss it. Here's the background. Here's links. So everybody that is a volunteer, well, except for Glenn, because he's retired, but basically has, their job, and then they are a volunteer that helps pay attention to various PAC activities, And then certainly some of those members, if there's an opportunity for, hey, we need a couple of volunteers to read this piece of legislation, highlight any areas of concern, oh, hey, can somebody help draft a letter that the URISA board would review on recommended actions? So there's similar to other committees that exist, most people have, their day job, and then they are a volunteer for like conference planning, the PAC, marketing, etc. So it's made up of all types of geospatial professionals across the country. So there's not really one industry that's represented more so than the other. I mean, there are people from across the board, all different types of organizations, experience levels, career levels. So, anybody who is interested in being involved with different policy type things, if you have an interest in, legislative activities, how can we make an impact to make sure that we are not seeing any legislation that's detrimental to us as members or companies or the organization. Absolutely. All the committees are certainly seeking additional engagement and new volunteers to be involved.
Okay, great. So our next question comes from Heather Studley, and she asks, will there be a URISA meetup at Esri UC?
Thank you for that question, Heather. Actually, that is in the works right now. So if you've been to the Esri UC in previous years, there have been various URISA events, whether it's chapter events, different committees getting together. URISA is physically working right now on kind of an all-encompassing URISA event that will take place at the Esri UC this year. So stay tuned, more details to come.
Okay. So we have another question here from Nicholas Willett. He asks, is there any information about the Advanced GIS Leadership Academy?
Great question. That is getting ready to launch. So for anybody who has attended the GIS Leadership Academy, URISA has heard for multiple years from attendees or graduates of the GLA, hey, what's next? Oh, hey, there's this topic. I need more details. I need to go further in depth on that training, etc. So over the past few years, an advanced GIS leadership academy has been in the works. And so content, exercises, facilitated discussions, that has been developed, and it's leaning towards the final stages of, reviewing and going through the exercises and activities, making those final tweaks. And so likely, don't hold me to it because it's very much dependent on the results and any further refinements that need to be made to the content and material. But there could possibly be an offering of the Advanced GIS Leadership Academy late this year. So all of that activity is definitely still in development.
All righty. So once again, if anybody has any further questions, we have about 7 minutes left here. Feel free to type that in the chat box. And your voice will be heard. This webinar will be posted on YouTube, on our YouTube page, within about a week or so. So if you want to rewatch it or anything like that, it'll be on YouTube. So Tim Nolan asked, what's Ashley's favorite committee?
I mean, isn't that like asking a parent which one's their favorite kid? I don't know that I'm allowed to answer that. But no, I mean, one thing I will say is when I first got involved with URISA, that I wanted to see kind of what all was available. So I actually joined several different committees for a month just to kind of get a feel for, hey, what is the PAC? What does that mean? And, showing up to various committee meetings here and there to see what it's like, what do they do? Do I feel like I'm a good fit there? And then I was able to kind of go, hey, here's, a few committees where I feel like I can really make a difference based on my expertise, experience, skills, interests, etc. So that was definitely one thing I'm really glad I did was, kind of jump around to the different committees, join a call or two, see what it's like, and then be able to go from there and go, hey, here are the selection of committees I feel like I can really make a difference on.
All right. So Eugene, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Mima. So does Glenn O'Grady or anyone at the PAC have a contact to apply?
Oh, sure. So I'll give the general URISA email address. It's just info@urisa.org, and emailing that will help push any inquiries to the right direction. So that email address is monitored constantly by URISA headquarters staff, and they will absolutely respond and get you pointed in the right direction for any inquiry, not just the PAC, but any committees that you might be interested in.
Perfect, thank you. And I typed that email address in the chat box there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Matt.
For ease of copy and paste there. All right, any further questions? Now's the time. So we're getting a lot of thanks, and I'm assuming that we're not having any further questions. So I guess we can go ahead and close out the meeting now and give everybody a few minutes back. So once again, thank you to our sponsors, Altera, Bad Elf, Concertec, New Edge, Tinriz, and Atmos Energy. If you are interested in volunteering with URISA Texas, there's a QR code down there on the bottom right-hand side of this slide. And there's some other links there to our information, email box, recorded speaker series videos, things like that. And Ashley, again, we thank you so much for your time, and this is a wonderful presentation. And I guess if nobody has any other further comments, we can go ahead and close the meeting out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt.
All righty.